and it has dried mud on the bill. And I was watching it. What it was doing is it was going down the creek bed and pulling out worms out of the mud rather than capturing fish. So kingfishers like ours are very aquatic based. Around the world in other parts, there's often woodland kingfishers, and they capture insects and worms and things like that. They don't actually live around the water. Also a zebra dove. This was around the control tower. I kind of walked through an open gate around the control tower. I don't think you can do that here in the US. You get arrested, but I guess they thought I was harmless, so they let me walk around. But it has the neat stripes on the back, very reminiscent of our Inca dove that's now in our area, except of course this one has the blue eye ring and lure. So met the guide from the company Tropical Birding, a guy named Phil Sean, an excellent birder from the US and good field guide, and then a birder from Sweden. So it was just the three of us, which was really cool to have that small of a group. Usually international birding groups are about 8 to 10 people. So we left and went to kind of a hilly area, and Phil had heard that there was a mountain peacock pheasant around. And this is a rare bird. I kind of casually studied it. I didn't really think we'd probably see it. But they'd had one in the area, and we were lucky to re-find this one. So it's a ground-dwelling, kind of like an upland game bird type, and very dark plumage. Usually they're in the forest understory. So it's pretty lucky to see this. There's lots of primates there. I thought I'd throw this in. This is a dusky langur, and they're identified by the pale patch on the upper lip, and then they have these pale markings on either side of the eye. It looks like their eyes are in parentheses. It's kind of unusual. And this was part of a troop that was eating these fruits. And this was in a dipterocarp tree. Dipterocarps are a common tree in Asia. They can be up to 280 feet tall, really big, some of them. And the name dipterocarp means two-winged fruit. So it literally has a fruit with these two leaf-like projections on it that helicopter to the ground. So we drove up to Mutiara, one of the parts of the Taman Negara National Park. So you drive up and you have to take a boat across to the landing. They actually have a funicular, which is cool. You put your bag in there and it raises up with like a gravity trade-off feed. And then you hike up the steps and you can see the lushness of the forest. So there's Phil Sean, the guy, and there's a Swedish birder. Ironically, Phil's next trip after this was to Southeast Arizona at the same time that I took my field ornithology class there. So we actually met up and merged our groups for a couple days. So that was just kind of a cool, fortuitous thing. The Swedish birder was a good birder. He was also obsessed with American politics. Every time we had Wi-Fi, he'd look up all the news sites and want to talk about American politics. And my thought was, I flew halfway around the world to get away from American politics. Let's talk birds. Let's talk plants and herps and bats and all sorts of cool stuff. Here's a really cool bee bird, the black and yellow broadbill. And broadbills are a group of mainly insectivorous birds. They'll also eat fruit. They're often high in the canopy. This one's about 70 feet over my head, so it's pretty far up there. But check out the spectacular colors, the turquoise bill, the yellow and black eye, then the color blocking of pink and black and yellow on the body. Really just a gorgeous bird, and just sitting there quietly, so you have to be really observant to find these types of species. Lots of lizards and skink-like critters out there. This lizard was really interesting because one, it held still and I got a good picture, but look at the hind leg. See the bright red coloration there? That's called aposematic coloration, and it's a startle color. So let's say a predator is about to grab you, you flash open your legs when you run away, and that flash of color may startle or delay the predator just even for a fraction of a second, and then give you the chance to get away. If you look at some of our American frogs like the bullfrog, they have a similar color pattern there. So kind of neat. Another one of our bee birds, this is a green broadbill. And I know the picture is a little bit fuzzy, but they're hard to find and they move fast. We were very lucky they were still singing and territorial, and their call is really neat. They call this bird the little Tarzan because it gives a Tarzan-like yodel call. So you kind of expect like Ron Ely or Johnny Weissmuller come swinging through on a vine. So I was really excited to see this bird because they're pretty hard to find. So this is a little bit, this is a very primitive bird, let's call it that. This is Wagler's pit viper, a highly venomous snake. So we were birding down the trail, and a park guide came walking up the trail and said, "Hey guys, did you see the snake back here?" So I pride myself on being a good observer of birds and other wildlife and finding things. Obviously, so we had a professional guide, and the Swedish guy was a good observer. So we walked about, I don't know, a couple hundred feet back down the trail, and this pit viper was sitting at eye level right on the side of the trail, and all three of us had walked right by it, didn't see it. So that was a little embarrassing that we missed a bright black, yellow, and white snake on an exposed limb in broad daylight. A little embarrassed there. But the guide was like, he had found it and wanted us to see it, which was cool. Because, you know, you don't see a lot of these things very often on trips, so it's good to see it. So you're probably asking who Wagler was. Probably in German it would be Vogler, but he was a German zoologist who mainly worked in South America. But one of his colleagues in Asia named this species in his honor. And the reason why was this was back during the era of shotgun ornithology, and Wagler accidentally shot and killed himself in Brazil while collecting birds. Yeah, a little unfortunate there. Today we use mist nets, binoculars, a lot more OSHA-approved methods, a lot safer. I will say I spent the rest of the day looking for this snake everywhere we went because I was embarrassed that I missed it. One other cool research thing they did with this species, because it's a pit viper and they can detect changes in temperature, they try to figure out how sensitive their ability to detect those changes is. And they think that this snake can detect changes as small as 0.003 Celsius. So just the slightest temperature change, they can detect that difference. That's remarkable. Here's a red-throated barbet, which we were able to get really close to because it had a nest cavity and was feeding nestlings. So this was actually from an observation tower, which is also cool. You can see the dagger-like bill that's common in barbets. The bright red and orange colors come from carotenoids in fruits. The black color is from melanins in their food. Green is from the porphyrins in the food. And blue is usually a structural coloration. You can also see the rictal bristles really well. See these hair-like projections, kind of like eyelashes? They are feathers, they just lack the barbs. So these are both sensory and they're also protective for the bird. So after losing about 5 pounds in sweat at Mutiara in the lowlands, we drove up to the highlands, to the famous Fraser's Hill. And Malaysia was a British colony, so when they were down on the coast, it was really hot and mosquito-y, and they'd want to get up into the hills to get the cooler temperatures. And so it was a great relief to get these cooler temperatures, see a whole bunch of new cool birds. It's named for Lewis James Fraser. He was a Scottish entrepreneur and miner, and he went to Fraser's Hill before it was called that, and he found what on the periodic table is labeled SN, which is tin. So he opened a tin mine. SN's kind of a weird thing, but we think it might come from the Latin for stannum, which is a silver and lead alloy, or from Cornish, which has the word sten, which means tin. So probably both Latin origin, of course, but so he opened a tin mine. Around the First World War, he suddenly disappeared off the mountain. The two hypotheses are either he was killed and eaten by a tiger, which is very possible. There are tigers around. There was one on game cameras at Mutiara within a couple weeks of us being there, so that was cool. The other hypothesis is that his competitors killed him and took over his mining interest. Hint, hint, it's the second one. So beautiful views, cool mornings, just a real relief. I saw this sign in town at the little village there. It says, "Stop feeding the monkey." It's kind of like bears. If you feed a monkey, you kill a monkey, because the monkeys then think that you always have food, and if you don't have it, they may attack. And that's legit. People do get attacked by the monkeys. So you have to be pretty wary. The Swedish guy that I was traveling with, he left his cabin door open at Mutiara, and long-tailed macaques got in and got his coffee packets that were in the cabin, and they also ate one of his shoes. So keep the doors closed, or maybe you have to electrify the fence so you can shock the monkey there. I'll make bad 80s music references. I apologize in advance. Really neat little fly-catching bird, the bronzed drongo. These are black or iridescent bluish-black flycatchers. This one's interesting because it's missing most of its tail. It was actually molting in a new tail, so that was kind of interesting to see. Also, anytime you see iridescent blue and black birds, there's a good chance they're reflecting in the UV spectrum. which we're learning a lot more about now. This is the little cuckoo dove, just a beautiful bird. The pale blue iris, that really nice kind of rufous and pink mixed into the plumage. And this was a bird fairly common at Fraser's Hill. In a little mixed flock, we found little pied flycatcher. So this is a flycatcher that's just barely bigger than a blue-gray gnatcatcher for comparison. So real tiny, very active. I was lucky to even get a picture of it. For you botany enthusiasts, threw this picture in. This is what you probably recognize as a pitcher plant. And it's in the genus Nepenthes. And so they have a really viscous fluid inside here. Contains 29 digestive proteins that will dissolve their prey, which is usually insects, but they've also been recorded killing small lizards, birds, and even small rodents that have crawled inside to get what they think is water, and instead they get zapped and digested by the plant. One interesting thing is you can see this leaf right here, that will actually close when it rains, so they don't get the water in there and dilutes their digestive juices. So there were a bunch of those. Little entomology here, giant blue scorpion, which was kind of walking on the side of the trail here. That was kind of a bit of a startle to look down and see that. So I just threw a room key there just to give a little bit of comparison. And that's a reference to the 1980s rock band, the Scorpions. Really neat rufous-browed flycatcher, which has the little rufous brow, and then they have a white throat with black outline on the breast. And there was a small flock that were feeding fledglings right after a rainstorm, was able to get really close to them. A bird that was a bit surprising out in the open was a streaked wren babbler. They're very skulking. They like to be on the forest floor. They're very vocal, but you don't see them very often. This one just popped up on a water culvert on the side of the road out of nowhere. So, you know, sometimes you just get lucky. There was no real skill involved in this one. I'd say biologically they're very similar to like a Carolina wren. They like kind of like digging around under leaves and have a little clump nest. This is a sultan tit. They're a large black and yellow chickadee, and they're in flocks and they're hyperactive, very kinetic, so they're hard to get photos of. So they're the sultans of swing, as the band Dire Straits said. Another nice bird that popped up in the forest was white-tailed robin. And robins are really flycatchers there. The names kind of overlap, but this one sat up on a little stick, which was really cool. Got a really close photo. Langurs, this is a white-thighed langur. See, it's on the native power cables. Not exactly the most wild-looking shot, but these were moving up the slope at Fraser's Hill, and really spectacular pelage, and then the facial expression was neat. This one watched us and kept scanning the sky looking for what I assume would be raptors. All right, so some of you may remember back in 2004, there was a huge earthquake, 9.2 magnitude off of Indonesia and Malaysia, and it created a massive tsunami, killed about 250,000 people at the minimum, and really a terrible, terrible situation. Well, one of the analysis that came out of it was the presence of mangrove, which is a tree that lives at the interface of the ocean and land. And they found that in areas without mangrove, the tsunami came in unabated and caused major property damage and killed lots of people. In areas that had mangrove still in place, it acts as a barrier, a wall that absorbed a lot of the energy. So it dissipated that energy, and the loss of life and property damage behind the mangrove areas was significantly lower. Now, the irony, of course, here is that when people came in to build their resorts and everything, they cleared out all the mangroves so that people would have ocean views of the sunset and all that. And we told them, don't do that. You know, you should keep the mangrove. And they said, you silly conservation science people, go away. We're trying to make money. Well, they made a lot of money, but they also got a lot of people killed, you know, when the tsunami happened. So now, interestingly, they're like, how do we get mangrove back? Now you want us, okay. So what we do is we go to wealthy companies that either have conservation ethics or they don't and they want to greenwash and get a better reputation. And so we get them to give money to restoration projects. And this is one of them. So this was a mangrove nursery where local people raised the mangrove trees and then restored the mangrove, which is awesome. and it looks like this. And this was at low tide. But they're restoring this mangrove that historically was there, so this is really positive. And you get good birds like mangrove whistler, which are only found in mangroves. So for birders, that's kind of a cool tick, because they're hard to find. There's also cool things like mud skippers, which is an amphibious fish. So it can live out of water for periods of time. They have those cool little periscope-like eyes. You could watch these guys for hours. They're just fun to watch. Also in the mangrove, we found gray leaf monkey. You notice they have extremely heavy outer fur called guard hair. We think this is to keep the mosquitoes off, because there's so many mosquitoes. Even though it's very insulating and it's very hot, they've adapted other ways of staying cool. So I'm zoomed in here. I'm not as close as this looks, excuse me, but they do keep track of you. You can get to about 20, 30 feet before they start to pay attention to you. And then you pull back and, show good ethics. Walking back to our car from the mangrove, these were long-tailed macaques lounging on our rental car. I'm sure you can probably guess why they hang around the cars in the parking lot is because there's food in the cars or in the trash bins, things like that. So we had to shoo them off the car to make sure they didn't get inside and destroy it trying to find food. And the one on the right was literally taking a nap. Like, I'm good, just gonna take a little nap here, wait for you to come back and feed me. Don't feed the monkeys. All right, so we dropped off the Swedish guy and picked up 4 Americans who had come in to join the Borneo part of the trip. So we flew down to Borneo and we drove immediately to the Danum Valley. And this is a spectacular place, and just unbelievably on the drive in, a small troop of pygmy elephants walked out of the forest right into the road. And the driver of the vehicle who worked there freaked out, got on his cell phone, called in the other drivers that had the people staying at the lodge. They hadn't seen these elephants for 3 weeks, apparently. So all these other people converged on this spot to try to see them before they went back in the forest and disappeared. So we were very lucky to see them. We didn't see any elephants for the next 5 days, so it was fortuitous. They're called a pygmy elephant. They're 8 to 9 feet tall, if that's pygmy. But compared to African elephants, which can be upwards of 12 feet tall, they are definitely smaller. They weigh about 5,000 pounds. African elephants weigh up to 12,000 pounds. So 2.5 tons of fun, 6 tons of fun. That's a little Weather Girls reference there. But they're quite interesting. Unfortunately, from a conservation standpoint, there's only 2,000 to 3,000 of them left on the island. And the reason why is the human population growth problem. As people have grown in population, they spread out, they cut down the forest and farm it. And the elephants are trying to use that habitat at the same time, and there's conflict. And I'll say it mildly by saying there's been casualties on both sides. Elephants have trampled farmers, and farmers have shot and killed the elephants. So this is a typical conservation problem you encounter where you have high population density. Wildlife usually loses. And so reserves like in the Danum Valley are important to save those last little pockets of these species. It's a tragedy of the commons. I think a lot of you are familiar with that concept. Just too much use of a resource usually leads to its crash. Stayed at the Borneo Rainforest Lodge, which is way nicer than I'm used to staying on a trip. It's extremely a nice place. Got out, started birding right away, and found black-crowned pitta. And pittas are very shy, skulking birds that stay on the ground a lot. We were very lucky to see this one. It was about 1 foot off the ground and singing. So it has the bright red breast, the black head, and the blue postocular stripe. But you don't see pittas very much. You have to work really hard and be really patient to see them. This was a spectacular bird, Malayan peacock pheasant. It'll probably be split into its own species from the mainland form. I'm sure you can see why it's called the peacock pheasant. It's got this spectacular tail with these iridescent blue spots all over, the orange cheek, skin, and eye. This one was actually part of a study. And if you look carefully, there's a band on its leg. They were declining in the reserve. And so they captured some, and we're also doing some radio telemetry trying to figure out why their population was declining. And this one was holding a territory and calling, and we were able to get close enough to see it. Most people think of trogons as being a South American, Central American type bird sneaking up into Arizona, but there are also trogons in Asia. This is a scarlet rumped trogon. This is the male. Really beautiful red coloration. Here's the female. So she has a brown head and an orangish color, and they had a fledgling with them, which is one of the reasons why we were able to see the whole family. They were actually quite accommodating, going around trying to find food for the youngster. This is a banded broadbill, another one of our bee birds. Notice the turquoise bill, which is often common in this group, and then these spectacular purples and browns and yellows and whites. And I'm not even sure how to describe all those colors. We'd have to look up the color book to see it. So this one was very accommodating out on a branch. One of my favorite groups of birds in the world are the tree swifts. And this one's called the whiskered tree swift. So they're called swift, but they actually look more like a swallow to me. They have that small bill, really, really long wings, just tremendously long curved wings. So they're really good in flight. And then they have these cool white whiskers going back along the cheek there. And so this one was rather nice and accommodating. So it got its picture made. One of the best ways to see things in rainforests and tropical forests are canopy towers. Something we don't really do here in the US as much as I think we should. And this is a cool way for people to get an experience off the ground. A lot of these trees are 200 feet or taller. So if you're on the ground, trying to see little birds up there is hard to do. So they build these towers. And at the Danum Valley, they have a 7-tower setup, which is amazing. So this was Tower 1. It's about 60, 70 feet off the ground. I'm a tall guy, and these are small, rickety little walkways. I don't like them, but I sure as hell go up them because that's where the wildlife is that I want to see. Now, they say that they're safe. Well, 3 of the towers were down at the Danum Valley because lightning hit one of the trees and knocked it over, and it took 2 more towers with it, which didn't help my confidence, by the way, knowing that. So we can only go to 3, the towers, but still we saw some really amazing things. Little John Cougar Mellencamp reference there. So here's what it looks like from one of the towers. There's the gravel road into the valley, and you can see there's all these different types of vegetation. There's a stream right there. And looking back in this pocket on the very last morning, after 5 days of looking, we finally found this bird. And I know it's not a great photo, but it's as good as I could get at about 200 yards. This is the Bornean bristlehead, one of our cool bee birds. And it's a really interesting bird. It's in a monotypic family, Pityriacidae, so there's no other bird like it in its family. They're only found in Borneo, so they're endemic. We don't know much about them. We know they live in a flock, so they might be cooperative breeders, but no one has ever found an active nest of this bird, ever. So and the terrain is very hilly. It's hard to follow a bird in this condition. I was able to get a couple of really crappy photos of it, but I went on Google Images and stole one so you could see what it really looks like. But it gets its name for these short orange bristle-like feathers sticking up, has this massive bill with a hook on the tip. So again, we look for 5 days and we're lucky to see it. Most birds that go there, they're lucky if they see it or even hear it. So I was pretty privileged. It was a cool little critter, Bornean forest dragon. Holding still, acting like no one could see it, even though we were all standing around taking pictures of it. My new favorite squirrel, this is the Bornean pygmy squirrel. You think that looks like a little mouse, but it's a real squirrel. It's only 3 inches long and weighs 0.7 ounces. So it's this teeny tiny little squirrel, and they feed on the bark. So I was joking that makes it a barkivore. I know it's a bad joke, but we then drove around to Sepalak, which is it has like an ecotourism bent to it. So they've got like facilities there and a canopy tower, which is this big sturdy metal beast. It's huge, and the walkways were a lot more solid than the suspended ones at Danum. Now I do find it disturbing though that if you're going to have people on a tower and walkways, you might want to not use your catchphrases "falling for birding." It kind of creates a bad image for those people who don't want to be up there. Interesting little informative sign. It's got a pigtail macaque saying, "I'm a naughty monkey." And what they do is the primates don't like the glossy signage they put up, and so they tear it down like this. So turns out it wasn't a pigtail macaque, but it was actually this young lady It was an orangutan that did it. And if we have time at the end, I've got a couple short videos of orangutans. I don't have good pictures, but if Alan will humor me, I'll show a couple quick videos of these orangutans, which were one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had with wildlife of any kind. Also at Sepalak, there's lots of kingfishers. This was blue-eared kingfisher, really electric coloration. One of the common hawks of Borneo is the crested serpent eagle, seen here, and with the spotted plumage, the yellow cheek and eye, and then the dark capped head. We'll see it again later. Imperial pigeons are fairly common here. This is the green imperial pigeon seen from the tower. Also was amazingly lucky to see a Wallace's hawk eagle while up on the canopy walkway. It came in to attack a giant squirrel. Imagine a squirrel 3 feet long, but it missed the squirrel, but instead it perched and preened right in front of us. So if I hadn't been on the tower, I would never have been able to be this close to a bird like this and get these spectacular views, including the crest feathers. We then went up the Kinabatangan River, very hot, humid, sauna-like conditions, but on the river moving with the sun going down, it was quite pleasant. So we went out even the first evening in the boat and right away found really cool birds like black hornbill. So it has this magnificent white casque and the white coloration behind the eye here. There was also a white crowned hornbill pair just beside it to the side over here. So I was going back and forth with the camera, trying to get images of both. Now, I'm going to get a little excited about this bird. This is a bat hawk. I've looked on 3 continents for this damn bird and finally was able to find it. I was riding in the front of the boat, looked over, saw it in the tree, got super excited, got picture and video, and just a really neat bird. It's got a yellowish eye, white throat markings, a crest, and yes, they do hunt bats. That's their specialty. And there was a huge bat cave near the river, which we'll talk about, and it was coming out to go hunt bats. So this is like my little avian superhero now. I'm Bat Hawk, right? Sounds like a cool avian superhero name. Ironically, I went to Ghana several months later, Bat Hawk again. You know, as soon as you find one, suddenly they're everywhere. So this is what they hunt. This is the wrinkle-lipped bat. It looks like a flying St. Bernard puppy. It's really weird looking. Here's the nose, here's the wrinkled lips, this is the ear, the eye, and so forth. And I'm going to relate that to this bird. So this is called the edible nest swiftlet. A lot of you probably have heard of bird's nest soup. This is the species that's collected for that. And specifically their nest is made of crystallized saliva. So its main component is sugar. So it's basically a sugary crystalline, almost like candy. And so unfortunately, people have collected this bird's nest for a long period of time, and that creates a conservation problem. There's also 2 other species of swiftlet, the black swiftlet and the mossy nest swiftlet, but their nests have debris in it like moss and twigs, so people don't want to eat that one. They just want the black swiftlet's nest. So I'm in the solution business also as a wildlife biologist, and so what they've done over there is they've tried to protect the cave that has all the swiftlets and the bats in it. And they have like game wardens and they protect it and limit access. But for the people along the river that want to collect these nests, they build these swiftlet houses. And they put snake anti-predator guards on it. And the swiftlets can go in and build their nests there. And the person who owns this property can collect those nests and sell them. But the ones in the cave are off limits to everybody. And by the way, you can tell this riparian habitat has been completely destroyed by the landowner for agriculture. So there's very little actual habitat left here. But so far, this strategy seems to be working for the swiftlets. Their numbers are good still and recovering. We took the boat out at night on little side tributaries. This was a buffy fish owl. And you can see these massive talons, and they capture fish, frogs, invertebrates, and so forth. There's the rhinoceros hornbill we opened with, and we actually got to watch it preen for a little while, which was neat, seeing this huge bill being used to preen. Striated heron, which is related to our green heron, they're cousins. Striated heron's the common small heron around the world, so you pretty much see it anywhere you go. Those of you that like snakes, this is a gray-bellied racer that was hanging on a limb over the river. Its eye is real cloudy, so it's probably about to shed. Also, an ant did a nice photo bomb there on the left. This is a colugo, which is a primate type of mammal. I'd say behaviorally it's similar to a southern flying squirrel. They have this patagium, a wing membrane, and they can glide through the forest. Actually, the first one I saw was on a night walk, gliding by. And they're absolutely beautiful. Size-wise, they're about the size of a possum, maybe a little smaller. So they're actually quite large. And the other thing they have is interesting, when they have their young, they can take that patagium and they wrap it around and make like a pouch for it against the female's body. It's pretty cool. Long-tailed macaque troops are all over the place. They're the common monkey pretty much everywhere. And you'd see troops of 30, 40, 50 plus at a time. And this one was, I was waiting to get on the boat and this little troop came up and we watched her. And a youngster that was feeding on the grass is there as well. You're not supposed to make direct eye contact. That's a challenge. You don't want them to attack you. So you kind of point your camera at them, but you don't stare at them too much. Now this is my dude right here. This is so cool. This is a pig-tailed macaque. And they have this diagnostic, cool little black head patch, really pretty fur. And we went up a little side tributary, maybe about 30 feet wide. And on one side of the tributary, you had a whole troop of pig-tailed macaques. And they let us get very close. And while we were there, on the other side of the creek, a different troop of pig-tailed macaques came up. And they started engaging in investigating each other and looking back and forth and kind of assessing the other troop. It kind of reminded me of like the Jets and the Sharks in West Side Story, you know, where they're all like checking each other out and then they break into Broadway dance moves. No, I don't. But this male was just amazing. He let us get within about 20 feet and didn't even look at us. I mean, he knew we were there, but he was so focused on studying that other troop and assessing if there was risk or opportunity. And so we drifted up, and this was the moment we got maybe a little too close. He threw the side eye over and was like, okay, time to go, back off, we gotta get out of here. He was like, you're getting too close. It was pretty obvious. Sorry to be so anthropomorphic, but you can't help it. Now this is a different primate that was along the river. This is a juvenile proboscis monkey. And here's a male. Unfortunately, he kept hiding behind the leaves, but they have this big, large nose. If we have time, I've got a short video that shows the whole nose of the proboscis of the male. Diagnostically, they also have the black underside of their hands. And so what he was doing was he had a whole troop of females, about 20 or 30, and his offspring moving through the canopy. And not long after I took this picture, I put the camera down. A young male challenged him from a tree like 20 feet away. And this male lunged, just literally jumped and tackled the other male all the way to the ground in a big thud, and then chased it off through the forest, came back up in the tree, sat up again like nothing had ever happened. Very hardcore. Of course, my camera's down, not on. I was so frozen by it. It was just amazing to watch, but I couldn't document it. One other really weird fact about male proboscis monkeys, they have permanent erections. I know that's an odd topic, but they're the only mammal that we know of that has that condition. We're not entirely sure why, but that's the case. It's pretty odd. Here's some red leaf monkeys eating tree buds. This was a cool female with a youngster moving through. You see she's got the green material all over her face, like almost like a little kid eating. But they're very calm. As long as you just kind of quietly move around them, you can get pretty close. And they are protected in this area. So poachers are not allowed in. The monkeys are collected for not only the pet trade, but also for the vaccination programs. But those they have permission for, supposedly, because they can test vaccines on them. This was along a little lake off kind of like an oxbow lake. This was mangrove cat snake, which is black with yellow stripes. And there were 3 of them in this tree. And we were speculating that maybe it was some sort of a breeding situation, you know, female attracting male, something like that. Pop quiz. This is the crested serpent eagle we saw earlier, kind of opening up and warming up in the early morning sun. There are saltwater crocodiles that come in up the river. This one was only about 6 feet long, but there were some big ones too. Also, there are lots of water monitors, both in peninsular Malaysia and on Borneo. This was a huge one. It was 5, 6 feet long, absolutely massive, and big bodied. They have a blue tongue, they stick out. And this one came to the water's edge and kind of checked us out. I was like, don't get any ideas. We're in a boat, we're good. We then drove to essentially our last site, Mount Kinabalu, which is 13,000 feet high. So tall mountain on the island. And this is the above tree line portion up here. Ignore that cell phone tower. But it was nice to get up again into the hills and the mountains to get some temperature reduction. So you see the valleys around it, lots of elevational layers for different bird communities and plant communities. So when we got there, it was nice and sunny. And then it rained for 3 days straight. Here's a nice waterfall, but it was the dry season, but it was raining. And this is a problem. And this is a global warming, global climate change issue. Even the drivers of the vehicles were complaining bitterly about global warming because they make all their money in the dry season. But if it's raining all the time, people don't sign up to go on the tours and stay at the place because they don't want to be in the rain. So it's costing them money because you're getting the wrong weather at the wrong time of year. And this is happening year after year. It's not like 1 year and then it's over. It just keeps happening. So there was a lot of frustration. But it's interesting that essentially an uneducated bus driver is discussing the details of global warming. Like, people are aware and it's affecting their lives. This is a Bornean mountain ground squirrel. And I want to say here that Malaysian Borneo is the squirreliest place on earth. If you're into squirrels, you gotta go. There are so many squirrels, it was distracting. So as a birder, I'm looking for movement in the tree canopy, and you see so many squirrels, it's distracting from the bird. So if you're really into squirrels, it's the squirreliest place ever. Was that movie where the cartoon where it always goes, squirrel? Like, you're like that the whole time. Some other birds at Mount Kinabalu. Let's see, we had a Bornean whistling thrush, which is kind of like an American robin in its behavior on the ground, hopping around. During a lull in the rain, I found this fledgling brown wood owl. It's fluffy white and molting in its color. And then if you look right above it, you see one of the adults in the adult plumage that's brown and streaked and so forth. So kind of cool to see a fledged owl during daylight hours. Flavescent bulbul, which was common on Mount Kinabalu with more of the whitish face, greenish wings. Indigo flycatcher. There's a number of species of blue flycatcher that all have this similar coloration, so you have to work pretty hard to identify them, but that's a good challenge if you like that. Mountain imperial pigeon, which if you look at the banded tail is very reminiscent of our band-tailed pigeon in the western US. Really a beautiful bird found at higher elevations. What looks like streaking on the wings, that's actually raindrops falling. And you can actually see beaded up water on the feathers. That's from the uropygial gland secretion, which is waxy. They waterproof their feathers with it. By the way, if you travel halfway around the world, I'm going to keep birding, even if it's raining. Like, you can still go out and find wildlife moving around, but you just got to be willing to stand around in the rain. I can sit at home and watch TV or play on the internet. Rain or shine, I'm going out. Another neat group of birds in Asia are the laughing thrushes. They're quite numerous. This is the Sunda laughing thrush. Has that pretty blue, light blue eye ring, and then the rufous on the wings and tail, gray color. You find these in flocks and mixed species flocks. For those of you that like insects, this is a lantern bug, which caught everybody's attention. Everybody likes these. They have cool colors, and they have this weird rostrum that sticks up that kind of looks like a lantern handle, I guess. That's how it got its name. They don't glow or anything like that. Now I'm going to finish up with this bird. This is a whitehead's broadbill. And as you can tell, it's this electric green and black bird, just spectacular color. I think about 2 days before, I found one for about 6 seconds in a mixed species flock, but most of the group didn't see it. Just the guide and I were able to see it. So that was frustrating. But during that period of time at Mount Kinabalu, we kept crisscrossing with a group of Chinese photographers. And they had really fancy equipment, and they were really good photographers. They weren't necessarily birders. They just wanted cool photos. but we exchanged information with them. Hey, we saw this over here. What do you see over there? So, good karma building there, build up good relationships. Well, when we were leaving, driving down the mountain, we came around a corner on the mountain, and the Chinese guys were out in the middle of the road with their tripods and their cameras. And we stopped, and didn't interfere. And they waved us over. So we got out and slowly walked down to them, and they had found this Whitehead's broadbill. So the bird was about 60 feet off the ground because the hill sloped off, and it was about, 70, 80 feet in, but it was just holding steady, kind of looking around. So we were able to get some pictures and cool video of this bird, and really, get a satisfying experience with the bird before we moved on. And we're very happy they let us come up. And, they could have, let us stay away and not said anything. So that was cool. Now, Whitehead's broadbill is part of what they call the Whitehead's trio on Borneo. There's the broadbill, there's the spider hunter right here, which is like a sunbird with a yellow rump and streaking. And we were able to see the Whitehead spider hunter. And this is Whitehead's trogon. Neither of these are my pictures, they're from Google. But what a spectacular bird, and we didn't see it. They'd finished nesting, and so they went completely silent. And when it rains, they stay in their tree cavities, which sucks, because if they don't come out of the cavity, you can't see them. So we didn't see it over multiple days. I mean, what are the odds I'm going to go back to Borneo to try to find this bird? Pretty slim. So you're always going to miss some birds on a trip like this that you want to see. And then usually you see some things you didn't expect to. There was always a bonus surprise or two. John Whitehead was a British zoologist and collector, and he had a couple of these species named after him. He died of malaria, if I remember right, from all his time in the tropics with the mosquitoes. So by the numbers, I was able to see 3 new families of birds. I'm trying to see all the orders, families, and genera of birds on Earth, ideally. I've now seen almost 90% of the taxonomic families. So seeing Calyptomenidae with the green broadbill group, the Pityriacidae, the Bornean bristlehead, and the Nopigidae is this bird, the pygmy cupwing, which is about the size of a ping pong ball. And that's the tail. It's just this tiny little stubby tail. So they're kind of wren-like, but their behavior is mouse-like. So they run around and hop on the ground in the understory of the forest. They don't really fly much. So finding them is very difficult, and we actually had some really good experiences with that bird. Total species count for the whole trip was 374, of which 243 were life birds. Yay, very cool. When I prepared for the trip, I thought peninsular Malaysia wouldn't be very good because I'd already birded in China, Cambodia, and New Guinea and Australia a little bit. So I'd seen a lot of the regional birds. But it turned out, I saw like 117 new birds in Malaysia proper. That was better than expected, but Borneo was worse than expected. Some of the species that I was hoping for were too rare or not around. And then the excessive rain really limited bird activity at times. And that cost us seeing some species we probably would have seen. But overall, still very cool. The last teaser, I mentioned that I went in December. This was pre-COVID spread. I went to Ghana with 3 other guys who were birders, did an independent tour there. And one of the big target birds was yellow-headed rockfowl. I'm sorry, yellow-headed picathartes or white-necked rockfowl, depending upon the name you use. And it's a crazy cool bird. And they nest in like these rocky cave areas. Very unusual bird. And we did see them, so that was really good. So that trip finished up in early January, and that's the end of the, I can do the stop share. Yeah, there we go. So that's been my trips up through the start of this year. Of course, all travel's on hold with COVID. Even if Americans were allowed to travel, I wouldn't be traveling right now out of the country. It's a mess out there. So not sure what the next stage is of travel. We'll have to wait and see. So that's the talk. I'm available for any questions if you like.
Well, thank you very much, Doug. I certainly learned a lot, not knowing much about birds in the Asia area. I love seeing all your pictures. You're a pretty good photographer as well as an excellent birder. So
thank you.
If anybody's got questions for Doug, feel free to unmute yourself. and ask questions or put them in the chat.
While people are pondering their questions, I was going to mention the camera I use is a Canon PowerShot. It's just a little camera like this. I don't carry a big SLR rig or anything like that. But for $500-600, it's a great little camera for doing photography. If you know, my main priority on these trips is to observe, to watch, to learn. Photography and everything is secondary usually. So I don't invest as much on the camera side. I should. I really need to. But I also travel very lightweight with that small camera. Any questions about any of
those little, I mean, those little power shots, I'm a photographer, so they are a neat little camera and certainly lightweight. I don't know if you've looked at any of the new mirrorless that are much lighter, but yeah,
when this camera finally conks out, which it will, given how much I've used it, you know, I'll definitely be in the market for something else. I've considered taking a small camera and a big camera, kind of go back and forth with it.
Yeah.
Looks like Karen asked what tour operator.
Somebody's asking. Yeah.
Yeah. The company I used for this one was Tropical Birding. They're a really good company. I actually know one of the owners. I birded with him in Cambodia, Keith Barnes, and they are top notch, top flight. They are, you know, going to charge for it. It's at a premium. These trips are, by my budget, very expensive. But they're the best way to do it. They take care of all the logistics. They provide you a good guide. Safety is a major priority for them. You know, they know where to go, where not to go, what might constitute danger, what might not. You know, they take care of a lot of the logistics for you. So I like Tropical Birding. They're very good. There are other companies out there that are equally as good, like Field Guides from here in the U.S. is great. Rock Jumper out of South Africa is extremely good. You know, so they're a good company. I've traveled with them twice. If I returned my business, that means you did a good job. I wouldn't travel with a company I didn't have a good experience with. That also raises an interesting question about going independently. I have done trips where I've gone on my own or with friends of mine, rented cars, drove around. Some parts of the world, though, with the language issue, you just can't. It's just not feasible, or it's not safe. You really have to go with somebody who knows what they're doing and has access to the right places to stay. Like, you know, if you go to New Guinea or something like that, you know, you're not going on your own. You know, that's just something you don't do. But, you know, I've traveled in South America and Central America on my own, you know, can get by. So.
Thanks, Doug. You want to, I know people are sticking around here. You want to share a couple of your videos, just
sure.
Tease us a little more.
Yeah, I've got some videos on YouTube. I don't know how much time we have. I've got a whole bunch. I'm not going to try to show them all, but I can see you to my YouTube channel later if you want. But I can show just like a selection of some neat ones. So I'll have to do some.
Yeah,
sorry?
I was just going to say that sounds good. You might put a link to your video YouTube channel or subscription in chat so we can see that.
Yeah. At the end, I'll do that. If you'll help me remember that.
Okay.
Let's see. Can you guys see my screen right now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So let's try one here. So you should see a bird walking on the ground, hopefully. Black-capped babbler. Somewhat reminiscent of our ovenbird. I mean, it walks around, looks under leaves for insects. And it's going to, I'm going to have to bounce back and forth with this setup. Here's a blue nuthatch, which is normally on the side of a tree, but this one took time out to preen. It'll stabilize, give it a second. Check out the cool markings on this bird. Blue-black with a white eye. It'll resolve focus-wise, give it a second. There's some preening. This is in the middle of a mixed species flock on the side of a Fraser's Hill. Let's see, I promised orangutan earlier also. Let's see, where'd they go?
Yep.
All right, how about, this was a good one. So this is a female. She actually has a youngster on her, so I can give it a sec. It'll resolve. She's doing a whoo call. You can just see the youngster there. So let me see, I've got, that wasn't the only one. Let's try. So here's the young female bouncing around through the canopy. There's mom with the baby on her right side. Their ability to move through the canopy is just unbelievable. And these were the orangutans that tore up the sign on the walkway, if you remember that photo. They're not falling, they're down climbing. I could barely keep up. Let's see, where was the, let's see, what else was I gonna show? This is kind of fun. Crested fireback, which is a game bird type. Sometimes just keep your camera going. You never know what's coming next, if at all. I don't know. So there's some neat stuff there. Let's see. The black hornbill. I had a photo of this earlier, but this is from a boat, so there's water moving and things like that. It's not going to be perfectly steady. There we go. Oh yeah, all sorts of stuff. Oh, the proboscis monkey, male. Got to see that big snout. That's pretty amazing. Oh, that froze up. Try this. Try this one. Is that face amazing? Let's see. Actually, let me try to lose. I study woodpeckers a lot, so I can't pass up a chance to show a lesser yellow-naped woodpecker, which is a little smaller than our pileated, but nearly. Is there anything else? Show you the rhinoceros hornbill preening. There, kind of a diva behavior there. Lift up its head to see everything. And probably the most stunning little guys from the trip were these silver-eared mesias or mesias. They're very active, so a little challenging getting them. There we go. Yeah, so there's some videos there that give you a little feel for some of the more dynamic parts of it. Oops.
So you use the same camera to take the videos as well, or?
Correct. I learned that the camera And video mode is actually better at picking up some of the smaller birds because they come in and out of focus so much on the regular focus. That sometimes video is better. I also just want to incorporate a little more dynamic experiences in documenting not just the photo, but what were they doing, a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's handheld, so I bobble a lot. Sorry?
I was just going to see if anybody else had any questions. If you want to go ahead and post a link to your YouTube page,
yeah,
that'd be great.
Yeah, I got to get the link again real quick. Sorry.
Can't believe Wayne doesn't have some questions.
There's the link. I don't know. I'm assuming it's an open link. I don't know if you should be able to get to it, I hope. And the trick is to hit there's just a couple videos load, but then there's like a whole channel full of them. If you click on the all videos, it'll pull them all up. Any other questions about the birding or the trip or critters?
Pretty cool. I enjoyed it for sure, and looked like we had a rapt audience that stuck around with us here, so everything's good.
Yeah.
Tony, do you have a question? Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. I'm going to go ahead and close down the meeting. Thanks again, Doug.
Thanks for inviting me.
Great job sharing your experience.
My pleasure. Anytime.